Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Renee Mehrra, and welcome to our show following on TV Asia and social media. Today, we're going to talk about, with our policymakers, about COVID-19 resources and access to all, some of the stuff that we may not know how to go about it and how to navigate in this uncertain times. So joining me today, we have Congresswoman Meng, and she's going to tell us all about, on the federal level, about the stimulus package and, again, the resources available, hotspots for kids, and so on. And joining Congresswoman Meng, we have New York State Senator John Liu, who's the chair of the Education Committee for New York State, as well as Assemblyman David Weprin, who's the chair of the Corrections Committee in New York State. And also joining is Harish Takkar, who's the president of the Association of Indians in America for New York. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us. And again, this global crisis has changed completely our way of looking at things, how we live our lives, and it's creating a lot of paradigm shift in many, many ways. But let's talk to Congresswoman Meng about what she's doing. She's putting out a lot of bills and introducing a lot of new legislation, which is very, very pertinent, especially in these times. So Congresswoman Meng, tell us about the stimulus payments. I know that's a kind of a silver lining over here. $1,200 for an individual, $2,400 for a couple, and $500 for children. But tell us, I think most people have gotten their checks. There is some people who are not qualifying, or they are going to be qualifying with your new bill that you're introducing, the ITI numbers. Share some thoughts on that.
Sure. First, thank you, Renee, for bringing us all together. I'm honored to be on this conference call with so many of our community leaders. With Harish, thank you for your leadership. To my colleague, Senator Liu, who is really championing issues related to our children's education, which we especially see the importance of and difficulties during this time. Thank you to Assemblyman Weprin, who obviously is leading on so many important issues, especially in the world of people who might not necessarily always be able to speak up for themselves. So this has been a really difficult time for people all over the country, all over the world, but especially here in Queens and especially in our shared districts, we've really seen what is happening at the heart of this coronavirus epidemic across the country. Right here in Queens, we are seeing so many families who are suffering. And yes, Renee, you mentioned the stimulus payments, the cash rebates that many families have recently gotten or will get very soon. The IRS has set up 2 portals where you can check. However, as great as these programs are, there are still a lot of people who are left out and are not able to receive this funding. There are about 200,000 New Yorkers, for example, who don't necessarily have a social security number, but they do pay taxes, and they currently are unable to get this cash assistance because of the prohibitions that the Senate Republicans placed on the legislation that we worked on. Also, for dependents, we are trying to raise the age so that daughters and sons up to age 24 are able to get the funds also, versus what we have now, which is just up to age 17. So we still have a lot of work to do.
And I believe also those Social Security beneficiaries, they will be also getting the payment a little later on.
Correct. If you filed taxes in 2018, 2019 online, and you've given your direct deposit account information, you should have received it already. If not, you can always check on irs.gov or to contact our office. Those who might not have automatically filed or who did file, but the IRS doesn't have your direct deposit info, you will get it soon. And you can always check the status on the website.
Grace, I also want to talk about some of the scams that are going on, unfortunately, in these, very, very dangerous climate at this time with, economic hardship and everything. And we have scams at this time, people calling in, getting bank account information. And so we have to let our viewers know that you've got to be very careful not to let, your information be let out like this point of time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always horrible during times like these when we see that people are preying on the most vulnerable and the most scared of all of us. There have been scams that have been going on from people who are going door to door promising testing that's allegedly available to people who are pretending to be able to help with the cash rebates. There are even people who are charging money to help small businesses allegedly to apply for small business loans. So none of that should be happening.
I'm going to come back to you on the small business loans and loans for nonprofits. But I want to ask you very quickly, and I'm going to go to Senator Liu after this. Access to computers is one thing. We're trying to eliminate the digital divide in our school kids, but there's also access to internet. So we need to have more hotspots. And I know you're introducing the legislation, and I'm going to go right into Senator Liu after that because he chairs the Education Committee in New York State.
Yes, so we know that there are about 12 million students around the nation that don't have access to the internet. So there are students who traditionally, and this is a problem way before the coronavirus pandemic, where they have to drive to the parking lot of their local fast food restaurant to be able to access internet in their parking lot, maybe to be able to do homework. So this is a problem across the country, also in New York City, and Senator Liu knows the issue best. But there are, I believe, about 30% of our students don't have access to the internet. And so it's important that we're doing what we can to make sure that no students are left behind during this time.
I believe like almost 12 million students in the US don't have broadband access. So I don't know if that number.
Correct.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Grace. I'm going to go and come back to you a little later, but I'm going to talk to Senator John Liu. John, tell us, as the chair of the Education Committee, right now we are looking for more funds in the Education Department, and I believe the governor has put out in the budget, I think, $27.9 billion for education relief. So I think that's very important. But share your thoughts on how we can get, eliminate or narrow the gap in the digital divide that we have with our students. So many thousands of them in New York who may not have access to the internet, but we are giving them the mobile device.
Well, Renee, thank you very much. I share Congresswoman Grace Meng's comments about thanking UNITV for putting this program together. And, I certainly want to thank our Congresswoman for her valiant efforts in Washington, even in the face of great Republican adversity. And she's been working to help the state of New York. We're the epicenter of this national health disaster. And so thank you, Grace, for your work. And Dave and I are partners in the state legislature. Renee specifically asked about what's happening with our public schools here in New York. I do have the privilege of chairing the Senate's Committee on New York City Education. And so we've been working with, or trying to stay on top of the Department of Education to make sure that in this age of remote learning, that all students have the same access to that remote learning. And that starts with having a device. Many kids and families didn't even have devices to connect to the internet. So I'm relatively satisfied that the Department of Education has done a good job of distributing just about 250,000 iPads to students who did not have them before. It took quite a bit of time, but as of yesterday, we're talking about just under 250,000 iPads. Still more to go as parents and students request them. And if there are still families who need this device, you do need to proactively contact the Department of Education, either online at their website or just call 311 and request a device. Along with the device comes connectivity, a T-Mobile service. Now, that service is cell service, so there's a little bit of, sometimes you get blind spots in the in the connectivity, and sometimes it's not as quick as possible, which points to the larger question that Grace and you alluded to as well, Renee, that too many kids, even in New York, the great city of New York, don't have access to the internet. So this is something clearly we have to address going forward. We have seen tremendous inequities, disparities across communities, not only in the health impact, but also, as you can see, the ability to learn with a lack of access to broadband. On a more bigger picture level, with regard to our public schools, there is now the very big concerns about how students will be graded for this academic year. The department has gone to a very simplified method, that I think does treat students fairly, students who just weren't able to engage in remote learning for a lot of reasons beyond their control. But also in some ways penalizes students that have continued to be 100% in their schoolwork. Those are some issues that we need to work out, especially going into the new academic year in September, where some of the remote learning policies will, I have no doubt, continue to remain in place.
So are they going to have, yeah, go ahead. Are they going to have grades like binary, needs improvement, or is okay, or work in progress? They're going to make it a little general and broader?
Yeah, I mean, the current plan by the Department of Education splits the grade levels into basically elementary school, middle school, and high school. Elementary school kids will only receive either a meets standards or a needs improvement grade, whereas middle school students will have those two, and a third option that teachers could assign, which would be course in progress, which indicates that they have not met the requirements for passing the class, but they will be given the opportunity in the summer and possibly the fall as well to complete their coursework. For high school students, the high school students will continue to get grades as they normally would, in accordance with the policy of that individual school. High schools do have different grading policies, but instead of any students getting failing grades for this term, they will instead get a course in progress as well, with an opportunity to make the work in the summer and in the fall. One of the ramifications of this policy, and many parents in our community are concerned about, is how will these grades affect admissions policies for not only colleges, but for high schools and middle schools as well. So those are some of the issues that the Department of Education has to work out and work out soon. But I do want to say something about, because you mentioned the budget of just under $28 billion in the state budget for education. One of the big problems is that is in great peril, because tax revenues, I mean, the state has, for the most part, shut down economically. So we're now talking about a $13 billion with a B, $13 billion shortfall in expected tax revenues, much of which was expected to fund public schools as well as other state services. And Governor Cuomo has talked about, I think a little bit pessimistically, but talked about a potential 20% cut to funding for public schools. That is something that we absolutely cannot sustain. And I know Grace and her colleagues in Washington, they are fighting for us to make sure that we get state aid in the next stimulus package for Washington. We need that because New York we're the epicenter of this COVID-19 crisis. And, we can't be treated like other states, which an earlier round basically did. We need to be treated as the state being the epicenter and having anywhere from a third to half of the COVID-19 cases.
Yeah, I totally agree on that, because we are the epicenter, and Queens is the hardest hit in New York. And we definitely need to see that our young students get what they need at this time, so that they become our future. They are our next generation. So we need to put a lot of resources for them. I'm going to come back to Grace after. Let me talk to Assemblyman David Weprin. David, you are the chair of the Corrections Committee, and how is this the criminal justice system impacted by COVID-19?
Well, COVID-19 has spread rapidly in our local jails as well as our state correctional facilities. It's really a dangerous situation, and it's not only incarcerated individuals, but correction officers, have put themselves in danger. They all, are essential employees. They're coming to work every day, and it's very hard to practice social distancing while you're incarcerated. So what we've asked for, myself, my counterpart, John's colleague in the Senate, Senator Luis Sepulveda, we've been talking on a daily basis or every other day with the senior governors people, the senior mayors people in the area, and we're trying to get inmates that are nonviolent, not dangerous, who are older, medically vulnerable, as well as those individuals that are within 90 days of their leaving prison, the end of their sentences, where because of COVID-19 and it's spreading so rapidly in our prison system, people, no matter what sentence they're serving, are not servicing a death sentence, and no one should have to, die because of the COVID-19. And there have been a couple of situations, and obviously a spreading situation. So we're trying to get the governor, the mayor, to release those vulnerable inmates who are not dangerous, older inmates, as well as those inmates which are within 90 days of their sentence. Another problem in the correction system is that since COVID-19 broke out, for the last 5 or 6 weeks, there have been no visitation at all in any correctional facility in the state or any local jail in the state. And that's not fair to the families of those incarcerated individuals, because they've lost contact in a lot of ways. So we've been pushing for unlimited free phone calls. The city has done it. The state has instituted 3 free phone calls, as well as stamps and free stamps and envelopes given to every inmate. The city is doing that as well. But it's not enough, because they're not getting the visitation. They're not having that contact with their family members. So I've been pushing to have video visitation on tablets that state correctional inmates have now. Everybody in the state correctional system has a tablet where they can study, they can learn things, they can read books, and I've been fighting to have that video visitation on the tablets. There are 9 other states in the United States that have that through a contract with the same vendor that does New York State. So it's been a slow process, but we're making progress. But it's very important that we take care of those vulnerable inmates. Yes, they often have committed crimes, but they're not sentenced to a death sentence. And certainly we want to be compassionate, and we want to make sure that the families of those incarcerated individuals who haven't done anything are not punished and are able to have contact with their loved ones.
What about the homeless condition? I know the subways are not being closed, like I think after 11 p.m. till 5 a.m. But are we helping them to get them in shelters and providing them food, clothing?
Yeah, well, that's new with the homeless population. They're shutting down the subway for, I think, the first time in my lifetime. Subway, New York City subways have been known to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for my entire lifetime. This is the first time, and we're one of the only transit systems in the world that does
For the
that.
entire lifetime of the MTA.
Yeah.
Entire lifetime of the MTA, older than me even, believe it or not. But again, this is scary, because 90% of the ridership on the MTA has eliminated, and it's creating tremendous budget problems for the MTA. They're practically bankrupt. New York City, as well as New York State, as John mentioned, the New York State deficit. The New York City also has a multi-billion-dollar deficit. We rely on those tax payments that normally would come in on April 15th for our budget. Now they're all delayed till July 15th, and there are a lot of people that aren't going to even be able to make those tax payments on July 15th because losing their jobs. And of course, we know unemployment is at record levels in a very short period of time. I too want to thank my good colleague, my former colleague in the Assembly, and now a distinguished member of the House, somebody that's a real superstar in Washington, for what she's done in the effort. This PPP program is a lifesaver for small businesses. It's a lifesaver for not-for-profits. It encourages people to keep employees on the payroll, and then they'll get these 1% loans, which will be forgiven if they beat the requirements. I think it's something like 80% keeping their employees. But I can't tell you how many not-for-profits, how many small businesses are only able to survive because of that PPP loan program. So thank you, Congresswoman Meng, for that. Thank you, Senator Liu, for working so closely with me and on a daily basis. I think we're having more meetings, remotely, through Zoom or through WebEx and or just regular phone calls than we've had all year. And this is obviously a crisis. We're trying to help our constituents. We overlap, and very important. A lot of people are going hungry. There's food insufficiency. We've been working very hard on that, as well as all the other issues of unemployment and working with our counterparts in the federal government as well. And Harish, I want to thank you for your service in the community, particularly in the Indian American community, which I'm so proud that I represent such a large Indian American population in my assembly district. And we've been working with so many people in the Indian American community, and Harish is clearly one of those outstanding leaders.
Yes, he is. And actually, we just distributed a Association of Indians in America in New York is distributed in the precinct in Queens and Forest Hills, as well as, for the elderly and the vulnerable, some food and pizzas and sodas and whatever we could do. And because just to say, hey, thank you for whatever you're doing, the essential workers and our healthcare workers, it's so very important. So thank you, Harish Takkar, for that. Grace, I want to talk to you about small business loans. Some of them can be forgiven, the payroll, as well as for nonprofits. Many nonprofits are feeling shortchanged at this point of time. What resources are available for them? And will these SBA loans, some of the percentage, how much could be forgiven so that they can get back on track after this pandemic is hopefully over?
Sure. Well, we've all heard stories about the importance of making sure that our small businesses are able to survive, and particularly to be able to keep our families and their employees on payroll. Last week, we returned to Washington, D.C. to pass a mini interim bill to add supplemental funding to programs like the PPP programs. However, what I do believe, and I'm glad to hear from the Assemblyman that it's helped so many organizations, but we actually need more transparency. We need, and we ask every single week, I asked Secretary Mnuchin just yesterday, we need more information and more transparency as to where exactly that money is. We want to know that our districts in New York, which are hardest hit, like the ones that the three of us share, that we are getting our fair share. We have heard way too many stories from companies like Shake Shack to Ruth's Chris, Potbelly to the LA Lakers who have gotten funds from this PPP program, and we need to make sure that the money is going where it needs to go. People can go to my website, meng.house.gov. Also in our district, on the Queens College campus, there's a small business development center. People can ask them for help. There are staff members there who speak multiple language who will literally help walk you through these processes.
So you're having in different translations the resources. That's another bill that's been introduced so that people do get access in a timely manner, so they are able to do different languages. Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, Bengali, different languages, right?
Yeah, well, we are asking, they don't do it yet. When this was all breaking in late February and early March, the CDC had no materials in translated languages. Soon after, Congress worked with them and they started issuing materials in different languages. However, we are proposing legislation that any COVID-19 related materials, as is part of the procedure that FEMA adheres to, is published in various languages, including South Asian languages. This is the best way to save lives. We have to get the information out there as quickly and as accurately as possible.
Grace, also you are passing another bill that's, addressing the anti-Asian sentiment at this point of time. Share with us on that bill.
Sure. Well, today is May 1st, and we begin to celebrate Asian American Heritage Month. However, we saw in many of our neighborhoods way before the virus actually hit our land here, the virus of anti-Asian discrimination had already affected many of our neighborhoods. People were scared to go to Chinese restaurants and supermarkets, for example. And so we put out a resolution that would ask Congress to stand united and condemn any anti-Asian sentiment, especially in relation to COVID-19. And we're thankful for leaders from different communities, from the Black community, Latino communities, who stood together, stood strong with the Asian American community.
Thank you very much. And Harish Takkar?
So Congresswoman, I have a question regarding H-1 visa. So a lot of students has to go back home. Their visa status is anything can be done. And other question is, the students who are here, they qualify any kind of funding?
I don't believe most categories apply. People should contact our office or a lawyer for specific questions, and I'm happy to help you offline. In terms of the stimulus and the cash rebates, unless you are a member of the military, there are 1 or 2 categories of student visas who are able to get the rebates, but otherwise you are not. And that's something that we are continuing to push for.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of tourists has been stuck in New York. And right now they have no way to go back because they cannot go back because the airlines are closed and so forth. So question is, if they're stuck here and the visa expire, do have any arrangement visa can be extended, or who should they contact?
We're getting conflicting information from the Department of Homeland Security. They should feel free to contact our office. We can look into the individual cases. And we have had situations also where students are stuck abroad. And we've been working with the Department of State to bring people back home as well.
I see. So the USCIS has to come up with some new agenda on this as to how they're going to work this out with people expiring, and then probably work with the federal legislators as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, your last comments on on COVID-19. We're going through very unprecedented, very uncertain times. But the most important is to observe social distancing and wear the mask and gloves and keep the 6 to 10 feet distance. But your final thoughts, and I'm going to start with John Liu, Senator Liu.
Well, I mean, I think it's great that you had us all on this conversation.
It was difficult to get you all.
It's a relatively short period of time, but we covered a lot, and I hope you do this again, Renee, because there's so much more to talk about. This has been a really tragic situation for people all over the world, and our community right here in Queens and New York certainly have not been exempt from that. The community has suffered many people who have passed on, and our hearts and prayers are with them and their families. And I pray that everyone remains safe and healthy. Stay indoors, don't go out there, continue to observe social distancing. And the more and better we do this, the earlier we can all get back together again.
Assemblyman Weprin?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been working very closely with people trying to get food, and we have halal and vegetarian and kosher options for our diverse communities in Queens. Nobody expected this shutdown for so long, and it's going to obviously continue for a while. And as Senator Liu rightly said, we really have to continue to practice the social distancing and stay home as much as you can. Obviously, if you have to go out for groceries or essential services, you should wear masks when you're out. And hopefully we'll be past this soon, and we can all be together and then work on a lot of work on improving the economy, getting us back up and running. It's not going to be a light switch turned on and everything's back to normal. It's going to take a very long time. So I think we're going to need everybody involved to get us back to probably a new normal. I don't think everything will be exactly like the old normal, but we need to get back to a new normal.
Absolutely. Congresswoman Grace Meng.
Once again, thank you, Renee, for bringing us all together. Thank you, Harish, for sharing so many real-life stories from the ground and how we can better help our constituents. Thank you always to my colleagues, Assemblyman Weprin, for helping so many people on the ground and, again, bringing issues to our attention. To Senator Lieu, I forgot to mention before that very early on, he led a letter in our New York State delegation to make sure that Congress was doing right and bringing more funding to the state of New York, especially for our students. And everyone be safe. I echo the sentiments of my colleagues and make sure we are checking in on people that might need some help as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grace.
Thanks,
Harry. Thanks, Dave. And thanks, Renee.
Renee, I want to say one thing.
Yes, go ahead.
First thing, also thank you, Congresswoman Grace Meng, Senator John Lieu, Assemblyman David Weprin, of course, Renee, for organizing this call. This week, we're delivering a free grocery in Floral Park area this Sunday. And also, we are helping out a lot of people who are stuck in New York. We're getting calls from our Consul General's office, so we're helping them out. And also, we're helping out other community throughout the New York.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you. Congresswoman Grace Meng, Assemblyman David Weprin, and Senator John Lieu, and Harish Takkar, President of Association of Indians in America in New York. And yes, we're going to go through a very new normal when we hit the normal. It's going to be a little different, the way we look at things, the way we interact with people. And I think what has brought us together, this pandemic is bringing us together, the importance of sharing and sacrifice and unifying in this crisis, because this invisible enemy is an equal opportunity destroyer. It doesn't look at your ethnicity, your nationality, your income status, your professionalism. It just goes at everybody. So everybody, please stay safe, please stay healthy, and we'll be back with all our policymakers again, because they are championing so many issues that are very critical on the city, state, and federal level. So I thank you all once again.
Yes, and Renee,
Thank you,
thank you for bringing us together and getting all this important information out to the public. And thank you for your leadership, Renee.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
TV Asia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.